which you did.
Correct.
There came a time when Armante, who was a friend of yours, came to live with you. According to you, he was going to help out with the rent.
Correct.
He came, he lived with you, he helped out with the rent for maybe a period of time, and then he helped himself to your girlfriend.
Correct.
Now they're a couple. When you were no longer a couple with Miss Calderon, she stayed in the apartment for a period of time, but then they both left.
Correct.
And you're suing both of them for rent and for the return of 2 cats that they took when they left. You claim the cats are yours.
That's correct.
That's what the case is about. And some cat expenses in the event that I let them keep the cat. Cats. 2 cats. So when did you and Miss Calderon sign a lease together?
We signed the lease together at the end of July with the landlord present.
July of 2022?
July of 2021. Correct.
And it was for a year?
Correct.
And you had a job working for whom, sir?
I worked for a company called Steris.
What do they do?
They provide medical equipment to hospitals all over the world.
How long have you been working for them?
I'm going to have 8 years under my belt this year.
And when you moved into the apartment in July of 2021, what kind of work was Miss Calderon doing?
At the time, she was working at I want to say an animal hotel.
It was a pet daycare boarding facility.
Okay. Were you an hourly employee?
I was an hourly employee.
And I am correct that when you moved in July, your arrangement was that you were going to pay the rent.
That was...
The arrangement.
Correct.
When did Armante come to live with you?
About August to...
That's
Right.
correct.
Shh.
Judy glares at Katie.
Amante was going to be our 3rd roommate.
You mean 1, 2, 3?
Correct.
Well, you're not roommates, really. You and the defendant, Miss Calderon, were not roommates. You shared a room.
We shared a room and
Armante was going to live where?
in another room.
And what was your arrangement with Armante with regard to paying rent?
We would split the rent 3 ways.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And how much was your share of the rent?
I would say approximately 927.
How long did you live there?
I was there when they signed the lease. I watched it all happen when they signed the lease. I came in, they signed everything.
Well, you didn't sign the lease.
I did not.
But you were there from the beginning?
Yes.
And it was your agreement with the plaintiff that you would pay 1/3 of the rent?
Yes.
Great.
We asked the landlord
Okay,
to.
so, hey, try not to hold each other's hands. Let's do the coochie-coochie someplace else. So you agreed with the plaintiff that despite the fact that you were not on the lease, you were going to assume the responsibility of 1/3 of the rent, $927.
Yes.
So you moved in July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. You left in April?
Yeah.
So you were there for 9 months.
Yes.
Did you pay rent for the 9 months?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that correct?
He paid rent for about the 7.5 months.
Okay. And then you left.
Yes.
Why did you leave?
I decided to leave because he decided to go to another place he was offered. So
What do you
I
mean he
could-
decided to go to another place
He
that was...
got a place from his grandparents in another city. So I couldn't hold down the rent with her. So I decided to leave to save money and go back to my parents' house.
Now, Mr. Jalil, you see, you don't make up a story like that, like he just told me. A lot of that has the ring of truth to it. Where are you living now?
My grandparents' house in an in-law unit
So when did you tell them that you were going to a different place?
in March.
When did you leave?
I left in July.
Did you let him know that you were staying until the end of the lease?
I
What? What?
I discussed with them that I would be leaving, but I would stick around to help them find either a different location or even suggesting that we all went back to our respected families just to, call it.
Mr. Jalil, this isn't working for you. I have to tell you something, sir. This case is not working for you at all. And it's only because Mr. Ramonte is very direct with me that you're suing them for $10,000. Where does that come from in your mind? Your agreement with her was you were going to pay the rent. You were never out of pocket. Your agreement was you were going to pay the rent. He paid his rent when he was there. He paid his 1/3. You then told them you were leaving. That's a whole different story than what you wrote in your complaint, Mr. Giulio. Do you understand?
Correct.
It's a whole different story. So, at best, Armante would owe you for 3 months' rent if they just left. But you told them that you were leaving. Now, when did you find out that they were a couple?
I found out at the end of April.
Were you all living together?
Yes.
So you just had 2 months left to the lease. So he was paying you, he paid you in March, you had May, June, you signed the lease in July, so it was